Okay. Uh, didn't have a observation sheet for you tonight. Doesn't mean we're not going to do them anymore. Just I want to get a little bit more ahead on some of the material, I guess. Um, so we actually may do. Alex and I are kind of kicking the idea around. We actually may do a class just strictly devoted to what we were doing, the observations, but maybe look at some more specific texts that we might have in mind, break them down, exegete them, do those things. So that might be a class coming down the line. We may try to do it in here. That'd be nice to have the TVs to work off of and write and make notes and all those things together. Anyway, so that may be coming, but it doesn't mean we're going to stop that for this class. I just want to get a little bit further ahead. But anywho, you do have an outline. I did give you another outline just to kind of follow along. But last time we were working our way through a few things, and we were talking about some things that we want to consider as we first start approaching the text. Okay? So, we started with, first off, number one, recognizing that the things that we're doing with this is not a new thing. It's very similar to the things that we do every day. Then we talked about making sure that we have the right attitude when we first approach the text. We want to make sure that we're not walking up to the text with, maybe old baggage that's coming with us, or any kind of preconceived notions or beliefs, perhaps. If you do that, it can sometimes affect how you understand the passage, okay, if you do that. So we want to avoid that, and we want to avoid coming to it with an already made-up mind. We also discussed those things. Our task, really, is to kind of separate ourselves from things that we have heard, what other people may believe or teach, and sometimes maybe what we've always believed, right? Sometimes we've got to separate ourselves even from ourselves and the things we've always been taught or something like that. And we want to try to come to it very openly, open-minded, just to try to look at it and try to take out what is given. We also discussed reading it, the reading in its entirety first, reading a book in its entirety. Do you remember why we talked about that? Why would that be a good thing? What about it? Okay, yeah, so it kind of helps us understand some of those things. We can see, how it was originally delivered to the people, and like in the first century, how it was originally delivered to them. We can see the overall flow of the writing, beginning from beginning to end. That's what you can get from that. And then you'll be able to, as we said, understand the context better of also certain passages or blocks of text. Remember I mentioned the pericope, right? That special weird word. But sometimes those blocks of text that we sometimes go to, they won't be so standalone, if that makes any sense. If you read the whole thing first, well, when you do come to that one little section, it doesn't stand on its own. You understand it. You have context behind it. Does that make sense? Yeah? A little bit? Okay. So, I'm just saying that sometimes when we start studying, we often want to go to this passage, 11 through 17 of whatever, and we just stick right there, right? But we miss perhaps chapters worth of material that might shed some light on this 11 through 17 passage. Okay, you get it? Okay. Anyway, so that really helps with all of that when you can read the whole thing first. We want to try, when you sit down to study, try to read it all in one sitting, if you can. You break up your reading. Sometimes you forget. You don't really remember what you've read. Does it take more time? Yes, it does. So maybe block off some time for that. But, if you were going to sit down and read 1 John, how long does it take to read 5 chapters? Not very long. You could read all 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John in like 30 minutes maybe. I don't know.
But when you read it all, aren't you automatically going to, right or wrong, you're going to think that's what this means. And then when you start dissecting it too, that's not what it means.
Yeah. the whole point of just reading it all the way through first is just to get an idea of what's there. You're not really going to stop and dissect everything yet, but at least when you've read it through once, and then you come back to it again, now you might be more familiar with it.
Well, but when you start looking at it, after you've read it, you may think, that's not what I thought they,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
that's not what I thought they.
absolutely, yeah. That could happen. You may have that realization, yeah, yeah. All right, so the whole point, you just want to, before you start analyzing the parts, get a look at the whole first, okay? So everything will make a whole lot more sense when you do that. But then, as we approach the text, okay, we also have to realize and accept with an A, that we are going to have some challenges to work through when you approach the text of the Bible. You naturally have challenges that you're going to have to work through. It just is what it is. Okay? Now, we'll talk about those challenges tonight, and you have those on your outline. But challenge number one, okay? Challenge number one. Now, look, they're not meant to knock your faith, okay? You come up against these challenges, they're not really meant to, sway you from anything. You just have to understand that this is the Bible. When you come to the Bible, this is some challenges. Anyway, okay, so challenges when studying. The first one is the third-party challenge. The third-party challenge. What do you think I mean by that, just offhand?
You mean like we're outside?
Yep, absolutely. Outside looking in. I think that's probably the most simple way to break it down like that. We have the challenge of reading the Bible as the third party. Okay? Or the people outside of the Bible looking into it. Make sense? We are looking into the Bible. We're the third party. We're outside of the Bible. Okay? So it is a challenge then from a third party perspective when reading sometimes. It just is. We are not the sender of the letter. We're not the sender of what's been written, nor are we the initial receiver of what has been written. Right? We're not the sender and we're not the receiver. Okay? For instance, what Paul wrote to the Corinthians, or the Christians at Corinth, he wrote to the Christians at Corinth. He didn't necessarily write to you. He didn't necessarily write to me. Right? He wrote to them. He wrote to Christians who were in a completely different time. They were in a completely different culture. But that's a challenge we have to work through. All right? Now, because we too are Christians and we kind of come from the same stock, so to speak, right? The principles that we then find that are written to them and that we find with them, that would still hold some weight for us as well. Does that make sense? Because we too are Christians, right? Okay. All right, so sometimes you got to work through that. But anyway, all right. So, whatever we would find principle-wise or commandments that we see that are given to them for, godly living or whatever and doing what God wants in the church, that would then apply. Okay, but most documents are understood when the sender has some prior knowledge of the receiver, and the receiver has some prior knowledge of the sender. So when we then go to look at the information between those two parties, sender and receiver, what we have to do as the third party looking in and as the interpreter is to try and read the document as if you were both the sender and the receiver. That's a challenge. That's challenging to do sometimes. All right, but in the New Testament, when you go to a particular book or letter, I should say, they are letters written, as the third party, it would be helpful to have a little bit of understanding and knowledge of the sender and knowledge of the receiver. It would be helpful if you had that. Okay? You want to try and figure out, who is sending the letter and who's receiving the letter, because the conversation is between those two groups ultimately. All right? So, we have the third-party challenge. It should also go without saying that God is the ultimate sender of the Word. Okay? Let's just always remember that. The Holy Spirit is, maybe. Anyway, so that's the first one. That's the first challenge that we have to work through as you first approach the text. All right? I know a lot of this stuff is preliminary when you start going down the road of studying the text and stuff, but it's just stuff to think about, okay? The second challenge we have, the language challenge. Okay, just like today, in how there are challenges with languages, especially the English language, you have that with the Bible and the Greek language as well. You have it today, you have it with the Bible. Okay? How things were worded and meant at the time of the writing may have a different meaning than how we would say it with our Western language and minds today. Does that make sense? Might have a different meaning. Okay? We have to understand that. So that's something we need to keep in mind. I think we all know by this point the New Testament is all from the Greek language. All right? And so usually what takes one word in the Greek to describe something, our English translations might use 2 or 3 words to try and translate that one Greek word to convey it properly. How many of us knew that? That's a challenge. Yeah, kind of like Spanish, yes.
Once in a while, it's a whole paragraph.
There you go. There you go. So it's not just with the Greek either. I mean, this happens in language, okay? Grammar and so forth. But so because we have this challenge and this barrier from the Greek to the English, there are some tools. There are some tools that can help you in this area. All right? I understand that not everybody knows Greek. I do not fully comprehend Greek or know Greek. I know some Greek. I know some words and so forth just because I've looked at it every day. I'm not a grammarian. I'm not a Greek scholar by no means. But there are tools that you can use to help you, okay, understand some of the Greek language. Words, terms, things like that, so that you can work through the language barrier that we have. Because, really, if we're studying the Bible and we're trying to get down to really what it is and what God is really trying to say to us, then we're going to need a little bit of help because it wasn't originally given in our language. I mean, it wasn't. And so we need help. And so when you're doing study, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some of these tools beside you as you study. Okay? Anyway, first tool that you might want to use, a Greek interlinear. Now, I have some, and pass them around if you want. Whatever, you can look at them. Just pass them on back. Greek interlinears. Greek interlinears are basically a Bible with Greek text in between the lines. Has anybody ever seen one? Okay, some have, some haven't. But anyway, the in between the lines is the actual Greek text and the words underneath the English words. All right? You can buy these. These are just 2 that I randomly pulled off Amazon, but just also be aware, sometimes they may come with commentary in them. They may come with commentary in the margins. I wouldn't really pay much attention to that. I don't know. Kind of spit out the bones if you need to. Anyway, you may just have to sift through some of what is said, but I think those on the screen are okay. But anyway, so here's an example of maybe what an interlinear would look like, okay? Can you see that? Barely? Okay, this is Matthew chapter 7, 21 to 23. And as you can see, there isn't exactly a Greek word underneath every single English word, is there? No, there's not. And that's because there is no such thing as a word-for-word translation. Did I burst somebody's bubble just then or no? So, some people see it, they want a word for word. I want a word for word. It's not possible. It's just not because of how the Greek language works. Okay? That's what it would look like. Anyway, sometimes the English has to use several words to try to convey one Greek word. One Greek word can mean an entire phrase. You can't have a word for word. It just doesn't work that way. Another example, John 1, 1 and 2. Underneath the English words, you see the Greek words. Okay? And if you have an interlinear, that's what it would look like most of the time. Now, these, if you can see, these are all different also. Anybody ever heard the term lemma and root? You start getting into this technical stuff, but sometimes it'll portray the manuscript. I don't think that's the manuscript version of like what's actually in the manuscript. Sometimes then it'll give you the lemma, it'll give you the root, it'll give you about as much. If you have a Bible software, it'll give you as much as you want it to give you. But most of the Greek interlinears they're just going to have probably the lemma of the Greek word there. Sometimes that'll have like one of those books has like a short little dictionary, like not a dictionary. Well, that one actually does have a dictionary in the back. But it'll be like it'll correspond with a number, and the number will be on the bottom of the page, and it'll be like, this word means this. And so it's helpful. Anyway.
Isn't the bottom word on that, that's the English Greek?
That's the transliterated word on the bottom. Yeah. Into English. Yeah. Good point. So anyway. All right, so that's one tool that you might want to use if you're sitting there studying, okay? Now, the next thing to add to that might be what's called a lexicon. Anybody heard of a lexicon before? Okay? So, a lexicon, lexicons are like dictionaries. They are dictionaries of other languages. It doesn't just have to be the Greek language. But if you were working with the New Testament, you would want a Greek-English lexicon. That's what you would need to find. Greek-English lexicon. All right? Again, lexicon, famous, just fancy term for a dictionary, basically. But these are going to be dictionaries of Greek words now. All right? So they will give you all of the possible range of meanings for a particular word. They'll give you how the word is used in this passage or that passage. So they'll give you, that information, which is good to know because it'll help you understand how a word is used in a given context. Sometimes you have the same word that's used, but it's used over here in this context, and it's used over here in this context, and it might not necessarily mean the same thing. So sometimes they're different, okay? The different entries that you will see under a Greek word would help you determine that, okay? Again, a nice Bible software kind of does it all for you, but you can buy these. But sometimes the English translations don't use the best English word or phrase to convey what the Greek word actually means. And therefore, it might give us a little bit of a different interpretation, whereas if you could look at a Greek-English lexicon or dictionary to see what the actual Greek word is and how it's used, well, now we can get a little bit more accurate interpretation. Okay? That's the point of that, because we're trying to understand what it's actually saying to us. All right? And we'll talk about translations and so forth later. Uh, yeah.
Since all the Greek and Hebrew words are numbered in those, I could look up and it'll have a number by it and say something like G2518. I can go and search in that same thing on my phone and look up for G2518 and see every other place that it's used.
I think those are the low and nida numbers, aren't they? Are you talking about those?
Yeah, and that way I can see where this exact word that is clearly understood in this context, over here it's like, oh wow, I didn't think of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You'll see these different lexicons, okay? Low and nida. That uses a particular specific numbering system for words also that you can find. You will see those if you start digging into more kind of deeper study. But anyway, but here's some of the more some more Greek English lexicons that I highly recommend referencing as you're studying, okay? One of those would be this. It's BDAG for short, okay? That's what you'll commonly hear it as in the theological world. It's a Greek English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature. That's a mouthful, so you just say BDAG for short. Anyway, BDAG is just short for those that edited it and put it together, okay? But this one here is basically known as the gold standard for Greek English lexicons. It's like top dog. It's the one that you really want to use. There are some other good ones, but most scholars, they're using this one a lot. Okay, I use it a lot, use it every day. Alex uses it every day. We use it all the time. Okay, it looks like this. It looks like this. So that's kind of what the physical book would look like. But if you were to search for a word up the top, that's the word koinonia. That's the word we get for fellowship, sharing, communion, and so forth. But as you can see, it gives you some different entries. Okay? I'm not sure. It may have more entries than that. That's just a screenshot. But 1, 2, 3 entries, right, all under the word koinonia. And so there are particular passages where it's used differently. Okay? But koinonia is found all over the place in the New Testament, and it's used in several different ways. But that'll give you that, okay? And that'll help you understand how it's being used in a particular context. That's what's really great about that. It is available on Amazon if you wanted to buy a physical copy. Check today; it was like $151 though. They're not cheap, but it's a beast. I mean, it's huge, and it is very, very good. Most of the time, if you hear me rattling off what one word means, this is where it's coming from. This BDAG source, this lexicon here, okay? Anyway. But another one would be TD&T for short, a theological dictionary of the New Testament. That one looks like this. Here. I actually lucked out, and I have the whole 10-volume set that I picked up for free somehow. Anyway, you can check this one out if you want. That one's really, really good. It'll give you all the words and stuff, but that one kind of gives you more of the history of the words a little bit. You get to read in some of that, and it'll kind of go through some of the history of it and an explanation of the words. That comes in a volume set. And if you want to ever borrow one of these, I mean, feel free. Just come talk to me. Anyway, those are kind of the top two I would use. Of course, there are some more familiar ones. Perhaps you're familiar maybe with this one here, Strong's Guide to Bible Words. Okay, maybe you're familiar with that one. Those are still fine. I don't necessarily use them, but just because I use some others. But I think those are generally okay, and will get you in the ballpark of trying to figure out what a word means. But anyway, those are tools to use to help you better understand what you're reading. So, if you're doing and you're wanting to do some deep study, grab an interlinear, okay? And so these, see the Greek words that are being used, then take that Greek word, go to a Greek lexicon, see the definition that's given for that word and that passage in context, and now you have a better understanding of what the passage and context is and what's being discussed. Because, again, Greek words carry a lot of meaning with them. Okay? And it's all part of the digging underneath the surface process. All right? Anyway, any questions thus far?
Is there a translation of the Bible that really puts it in almost a modern, I know it may not, the
Yeah.
words that they use may not actually fit with the
There is. To answer your question real quick, we'll talk about translations later, but just know that the more, okay, you have a spectrum. There you go. Yeah. The further down the line into, or let's go this way maybe, the further down the line into, unfortunately, what's kind of more understandable, to use that, the less and less accurate they become. They sacrifice a little bit of accuracy so that they can spit it out in, let's say, the common language, I guess. Huh?
What translation do you think that rides the fence?
Nah, I don't know. There's a lot. I mean, I don't use King James. I don't recommend King James just for various reasons. You can still learn how to be safe. Don't worry. But there's just better translations, flat out. There's just better ones. There are better ones that are easier to understand. But to say exactly where that line is, that might be pretty subjective. So I don't know. It just kind of is what it is. It is whatever. But we'll talk about translations later. Yeah.
As an old retired preacher, these lexicons you mentioned, I've not heard of. And where does like Young's analytical and Thayer, do they even rate anymore?
I think so. I mean, I think they still carry some weight.
If you hear me teach anything,
I mean, most of those Greek scholars and stuff, they're all going to be pretty close to the same wording. I mean, you can't really get that far away from what a Greek word means if you're really digging into it.
really gotten much better and more sophisticated.
Yeah. And I don't even know when BDAG came out. I haven't looked into much of that. So I can't speak a lot to the Thayer and all of that.
That's just what I have on my shelf.
But-
from the 70s,
Sure. And a lot of them, I don't know how much they've been updated. I mean, maybe, have you looked into any of that lately?
A lot of them haven't really been significantly updated.
Yeah.
And really what it comes down to is format and usefulness.
Mhm.
Like I use like the app I have on my phone, I can pull up Thayer's.
Yeah.
Thayer's is often tied to this Strong's numbering system. They kind of intermarried them in different things.
Yeah.
It's good, but it's very archaic in how it approaches the word.
Yeah.
It gets into a lot of nuance with things that just are random in the Near Middle East that
Yeah.
tie to it. And
Yeah.
They have Assyrian tie-ins to
Yeah.
Greek words. So it's not bad, but if you're really just trying to concentrate on what does this Greek word mean contextually in all of these passages, Thayer's can get you there, Strong's, Young's, all of them can get you there, but you're going to have to dig a little harder in
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
parse out what's actually useful
Yeah.
versus what's just background.
And I think that's what BDAG does really well.
Yeah.
It gives you some straight stuff.
Cuts to the
That
chase.
yeah.
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 I can see that, how you explain that, I understand that perfectly, because Thayer will go into a lot of.
Yeah.
research.
And even the TD&T and sometimes BDAG, I mean, they'll tail off and be like, Ignatius used this or so and so used this. The tie-ins that you see, this is some of this is a little bit more technical for deeper study, but it's just stuff to be aware of. But yeah. So anyway, we're not done with the challenges though. So moving on to the third challenge that we have. You have a cultural challenge. Challenges we come to as we approach the text when we get ready to study. You have a cultural challenge as well. Okay? So sometimes there are certain things we read about that have to do with the culture of the time. right? First century culture. Okay? So that includes, different ideas. That includes different concepts, different customs, worldviews, different things that we see those early people doing. It may take into account the time of writing, the location of where the people are, what things are said, how they are written, etc. But that is a challenge for us as the third party. Okay? Just think about how challenging it is if you dropped a foreigner into this country in America today. How challenging would that be for them? Quite the challenge, wouldn't it? Do you think they would have some cultural challenges to work through in order to understand everybody and get an understanding of how things flow and go around here? Yeah, especially going like to the north and then you go down to the south and like, y'all are weird. It's just a difference. There's a difference. There's cultural challenges all the time, even today. Okay? So in a similar way then, we have that when it comes to the Bible. You have to understand that. You have to accept that. You got to know that just going in. There's going to be some cultural challenges to it. Therefore, sometimes we do have to do some extra research in order to understand the customs of the people of the time of writing, as well as the understanding, the differences between cultural things talked about versus perhaps timeless commands of God. Right? So how do we sift through what might be a cultural thing versus what might be a universal God thing? That's a legitimate thing. And there are multiple things that we find in Scripture that pose a challenge for us to work through sometimes, but it's because of the culture and our lack of understanding it. We just don't understand it. We're thousands of years removed from it. We don't get it. And we have Western minds that are far, far different from a concrete Jewish mind. Okay? You just got to understand that. So, for example, you have the whole head covering thing, right? In 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Culturally, that was a thing for the women. It signified something in that culture, whether their head was covered or whether it was not. In that culture of Corinth. Okay? You also have the problem that was going on with the Lord's Supper in that chapter and how they were treating it. Well, how they were treating it was actually similar to their pagan culture. And if you ever look into pagan dinner parties and how they were orchestrated and how kind of what they did in those and how they typically went, well then that kind of helps you understand why they were treating the Lord's Supper the way that they were, because it was very similar to a pagan dinner party. That's a cultural thing. You also have things like the holy kiss that's talked about in Romans chapter 16. You have the washing of feet in John chapter 13. These are cultural things that are sometimes challenging for us to understand because we're not a part of what the culture was. All right? So,
Like some people say, like for instance, a woman should be silent during worship. Well, what about people say, well, it also says they should cover their heads? Where do you know?
context helps clean some of that up. One is cultural, one is taken all the way back to creation. The natural order of things, Paul would also talk about. That's kind of how you would differentiate that, if you got deep into that conversation. But we're not looking at 1 Timothy right now. So, no, I get you. Yeah.
If they took the Lord's Supper that way, then how come we don't do it this way today?
Yeah, yeah. No, those are challenges, absolutely, that you have to work through. But anyway.
Corinth, though, was completely different from Judea, Samaria, Galilee, that area.
Yeah.
Because that had been a certain way for a
Yeah.
long period of time. Corinth, they and
Yeah.
the isthmus that they wanted to build a canal across brought cultures from all over the world that were pagan in nature.
Yeah.
And were passed along to people as they went through.
Yeah.
It took anywhere from days to weeks.
So you just have to start really examining things and determine what is cultural or what is a principle that we are supposed to get from whatever we're looking at, okay? We'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but context and just sit down and examine it a little bit more. But that's a deeper discussion for what we're talking about tonight, honestly. I know I like where your mind's going, but that is a deeper discussion. It's not elementary. It's not elementary because that trips a lot of people up, and it's part of a hermeneutic discussion, and yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I know. This is why we got to be ready. We got to get ready. Anyway, this is why we come to Bible class, to get ready. Anyway, so. But you just have to realize there's cultural things for Jews. There were cultural things in the Gentile world also that we just don't get or understand sometimes. And that is then where we might want to grab an outside source piece of material, okay, to help us understand the context of the first century or something. You know, there's historians that wrote. I mean, they wrote all the time. We often quote Josephus, right? There's so many, and there's contemporaries, and these guys, they knew some of the apostles. They were that close to them. Yeah, their writings are not inspired, but boy, they carry a lot of weight. They knew them. Okay? So that's when you start reaching over, because the Bible itself doesn't necessarily always give us the details that we're looking for to fully understand it. Okay? And it's okay to go outside the Bible for a Bible thing. That is completely fine, okay? Just don't start running off and taking what Augustine wrote about as gospel, okay? He's not inspired, all right? Anyway, fourthly, before we end, we have the historical challenge also. You have cultural challenges, okay? You got to figure out ways to sift through that. How do you do that? Then you have historical challenges, okay? I'll just talk about one here, really. One historical challenge that we see. And these are just things that you would come to that it's like, I'm not real sure about that. There may be some history written about that. But the Bible really just doesn't shed much light on it, okay? But one thing one deal with that, one historical challenge, the Samaritans and the Jews. That's a big one. Big historical challenge that we have to work through. We don't necessarily get all of that stuff. But I'll briefly explain. So in this historical challenge, it would be trying to understand why you have this sort of animosity that's there in the text, right, as you read, especially in the Gospels. But so you had Samaritans and you had Jews that didn't get along because Samaritans are descendants of the Israelite people, okay? And when Assyria, way back when, at about 722 or 21 BC, Assyria comes, and you had northern tribe of Israel up here, you had southern tribe of Judah down here. They had split, so one up here and one down here. Assyria comes in 722, and they overtake the one in the north. Assyrian captivity, as it's known, okay? They take them off, and they disperse all of those people. So, well, not all of them. They left some northern Israelite people in their homeland. Okay? Now, the problem was, the Assyrian king, he brings some other people. So he deports some of the northern Israelites and just says, you're gone, the exile and Assyrian captivity. But then he brings people from like Babylon, who else? Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Safar Varim. People from those places, okay? And brings them and like basically transplants those people into the northern part of Israel. Okay, now there's a leftover people there. Okay, now follow me. Over time, they introduced those people that the Assyrian king transplanted in their land. Over time, they started introducing their pagan gods. Okay, they introduced their gods to the leftover Israelite people. They started intermarrying together, and which led then to their idolatry, of which was against the law that God said, don't do that. And before you know it, they were corrupted. They were compromised. Well, come 586, down in the southern part, where the southern kingdom of Judah was, they get overtaken and overran by Babylon in the Babylonian captivity because of their idolatry, mind you. And they're taken off to Babylon for 70 years. They were actually able to come back after that 70-year span. Okay? And then after that, after they left there, you never see any more idolatry with those people. They had a come to Jesus moment, if you will. Okay? So they come out of that with this renewed sense of faithfulness, so to speak. Okay? We're not going to do that stuff anymore. They're done with idolatry, and they're going to kind of go back and redo. As they're going back, they encounter their kinfolk, basically, who were left in the land in the north. Okay? They're old neighbors, because Samaria was very close to southern part of Judah. I mean, it's all right there. It's 150 miles, basically. Okay? Top to bottom. Dan to Beersheba, as they say. So they encounter those people in Samaria, and they see that they have been compromised during all of this time. They're old Israelite people. And they see that they're sitting here trying to follow Yahweh and these other gods that these transplants had brought in with them. Okay? And so now they see them, those people that came out of the Babylonian captivity, they see their old kinfolk now as basically defiled. They're defiled people because they have gotten with the foreign nations, they've intermarried with the foreign nations, and they were never supposed to be around them. Okay? And so, now, as you move through time, you have this natural division and this distaste for one another, and you see that in the Gospels, because they were not supposed to get with those people. Okay? And so, then, when you get to the Gospels, Jesus is like, hey, I need to make a stop off at Samaria. What? Samaria? I don't know about that. You don't get all of that necessarily from just the straightforward reading of the New Testament and the division that you see. You get a lot of it from the Old Testament, okay? But then you can also grab some other outside sources, history, and get that as well. Okay? Historical challenges that we come to. I sat sorry, I'll let you go, but I sat in a lecture when I went to the Bear Valley lectureship. I sat in two. And two of the lectures, one was on basically the Herod dynasty, and then one was on the rise of the Pharisees. You don't necessarily get all that from just reading the New Testament. You've got to go to maybe some intertestamental books and stuff, some more history books, okay, that shed some light on this stuff, all right? But anyway, that's some challenges that we have. Don't let them knock your faith. Just understand the Bible is a whole different world. It's a whole different animal. You can't approach it like you do a normal book. It's not a normal book. It's the Word of God. And it's got to be handled delicately. But there's a lot there. And you can understand it. I want you to know that. You can understand the things that are written. Okay? It's just sometimes we just got to have some more tools and strengthen our arsenal and what we got. All right? Because we want to know it. We want to know what it says. We're done. We're done.